Welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about the multi-res modifier. So let's go ahead and open up Blender if you haven't already. I'm going to turn on my shortcut keys here so y'all can see what I'm clicking. And let's go ahead and save it. Let's do save as. I'm just going to call this multi-res. You can call it anything you'd like. And here we got our little monkey. So the main thing about the multi-res is it's really used for sculpting most of the time. That's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and click on the flexible monkey here in our flexible design. And let's click on the little wrench here and add our next modifier, which is multi-resolution. And at first it seems kind of like a lot going on. We've got the kind of main section right in here, and then we've got the shape and the generate tab and the advanced. And so really the main thing that you can do with the multi-res is subdivide things. So notice when we click subdivide, bloop, we get some ones that appear here. And these are 3 different levels. So there's the viewport subdivision, which is just kind of what we see here. Notice if we click this arrow, it will kind of toggle between what we just did and what we have kind of multi-resed. And then we've got our sculpt view. So say if we were sculpting, this is the level of kind of detail that we want to see while we're in sculpt mode. And this is the level of detail we want to see when we're in render mode. So say if you're sculpting and it's getting pretty heavy, you can keep your level viewport pretty low. But let's go ahead and click it some more. So let's subdivide. And now we've got 2. Notice our monkey got a little smoother. And if we click it one more time, our monkey's pretty smooth. So already we've got a really smooth monkey. The first way we did a subdivision was with the big subdivide button. And that's what we're going to do most of the time. But say if you wanted to keep this like really boxy Suzanne shape here, and you didn't want it to get smooth, but you wanted more geometry, you could do simple or linear. So simple will still, subdivide all of the mesh, but it's still going to give us this kind of blocky Suzanne look. So sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. And then we could also do linear subdivisions, which are very similar to simple. The only difference I can really tell, so let me show you kind of a visual example. If we create a new object, we'll just do Shift A. And let's add in a cylinder and make it pretty big. So maybe the radius, we could do 25. And for the depth, we could do 50. There we go. And we can just hit G and X and move it on over here. And let's go ahead and just make it another duplicate. So Shift D and then hit X. So this, for the first one here, or the middle one, we can add a multi-resolution. And let's click simple a few times, maybe 3 times. So now we got 3 levels of simple subdivision, and we can't see what's happening because we have optimal display. So go ahead and check that off. And notice we've got all this simple subdivision. And if we click on this little cylinder here and add a multi-res and do linear subdivision for maybe 3 times here. So we've got 3 linears, and let's turn off optimal display as well. So notice the lines look very, very, very similar. The only real difference are these sharp points here. So linear is kind of what it sounds like. It's very linear. It's just subdividing in a very like straight lined way. Let me see if I can zoom in here. See how these lines right here are very straight, where these over here are kind of curvy. So that's the only real like huge difference that I've ever really noticed from those 2 types of subdivision. So, depending on what you're trying to do, that may help you, but most of the time you could probably just do like subdivide or linear on any object you're trying to, add resolution to. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those. I just kind of want to show you a visual difference between these 2. If it helps anyone out there. So let's just go ahead and delete those. And let's get back to our monkey. So I'm just going to hit period on the numpad. And let's float around here and keep on going. So say if you accidentally, subdivide too many times and you want to undo that, you could just simply, delete your subdivision here, or you could just crank down the level of viewport and delete higher levels of subdivision. And so notice when we delete that, it's going to zero out. But say if you had an object that you accidentally applied your multi-res. So go ahead and apply your multi-res. Make sure you've got some subdivisions or some geometry here to play with. You can actually reverse this with the multi-res. So let's go down here to multi-resolution, and you can unsubdivide. So notice, watch our monkey as we unsubdivide. Click that. Notice some of the subdivision went away. And we can do it again, unsubdivide. And essentially Blender is just doing the opposite of what we've been doing, is just making it more simple. So let's unsubdivide, and there we go. And we can even do one more. No, we can't. That's it. So now we're kind of back to our original monkey. Blender's just going to kind of make its best guesses on, the way to simplify your object here. So that's another way you can use the unsubdivide here. So let's go ahead and close that out. And let's get a new monkey, because I've kind of messed this monkey up. So let's just go ahead and delete that. And let's add in another monkey. And we can do maybe like 25 for the size. That's good. And let's add our multi-res. So we've kind of covered pretty much everything in here. The only thing we haven't really touched base on is the sculpt base mesh. So say if we did want to sculpt on our monkey, just subdivide a few times. And if we go into sculpt mode, Control Tab down right there. So if we don't have this box checked, anytime we like move our monkey, we try to sculpt some stuff and we, make changes to our mesh here. Let's do the grab maybe. So just grab the grab brush. Say if I'm moving the ears, things like that. If we hit edit, or if we hit tab to go into edit mode, notice our base mesh is exactly the same. It hasn't changed at all. We've just kind of manipulated the monkey in sculpt mode. But if we wanted to affect the base mesh, you can check this box, sculpt base mesh. And now if you are in sculpt mode and you start sculpting things and moving things all around, let's like maybe move the eyeball down here, bring this one here. I'm just using the grab tool to kind of move this around, maybe even the nose a little bit. If you tab into edit mode now, notice the ear has been pulled up, the lips been pulled out, the head up here, and essentially the Blender is trying to move the original base mesh to match whatever you're doing in sculpting. So I don't use that too often, but that's a little bit more destructive, but there may be a case where you need or want that to happen. So that's what that little checkbox there does. And let's go ahead and go back into object mode, Control Tab to the left. And I'm just going to delete this monkey here. And let's bring in another monkey. So I'm going to do Shift A. Now let's do some of the more advanced type things in our multi-res modifier. So we've covered most of these little guys, these buttons here. Now let's talk about shape. So say if we wanted to add, almost like copy a multi-res to another object, we could do that. So let's say we wanted to sculpt our monkey, maybe do 3 subdivisions, and let's go ahead and apply that. So now we've kind of baked in all this geometry, right? We've got, let's see what our stats are here. We've got 31,666 vertices that make up this monkey now. And if we went into sculpt mode and we started sculpting, let's just kind of make some easy changes. Just put a little lump on the head. But say if you were working on this monkey for hours and hours and hours, and you wanted to kind of copy your sculpting to a similar sized object, then what you could do is go into object mode. Let's just make another monkey. Shift A, make our monkey here, and we'll just do G and X and just kind of slide that over. And notice we don't have a multi-res on this object, because we've already applied it. But say if we wanted to apply our changes or our sculpts to another object, we could just click on that and add a multi-resolution, subdivide a few times, we'll do 3, and then we can click on the original, anything that you've put your hard work into, any of your designs, just click on that one first, shift click on the second object, make sure that the second object has the multi-res, and then under shape, you can do reshape. And looky there, it's copied this, any details we've made on this original shape, it has now copied it over to our design here. And that's kind of a workaround way to copy any of your sculpting that you've kind of baked into a mesh onto another mesh. So if you wanted to come back, and change the subdivisions, you could now have that control back. Another thing you can do, let's just go ahead and get rid of this monkey here. Let's delete him. Say if we have this monkey here and we tab into edit mode, notice our base mesh is completely, original. This is the original kind of base mesh. And then we've got our sculpted multi-res geometry on top. But if we wanted Blender to kind of reshape our base mesh to match what we've done with our sculpting, we could apply the base. And now if we go into edit mode, notice Blender's tried to kind of reconfigure our base mesh to fit our new kind of sculpt here. I don't really use that often, but that's what those two buttons do. So reshape is kind of like copying complex sculpting data to another similar shaped object. And the caveat on that is that whatever objects you're copying things from have to have the exact same number of vertices. So it can get a little tricky. Usually you'll use it for like animation, or if you're going to like retopologize some other design and you need it to be a little lighter because sculpting can get pretty heavy. You can kind of copy over your details with reshape. So that's what those two buttons do. Let's go ahead and jump into generate next. So let's just kind of delete this guy again. We'll just delete this monkey. Let's create a new monkey. So I'm just do shift A monkey and then period to kind of snap the view over there. And let's add a multi-res again. And now let's look at the generate. So say if we subdivided this a bunch, let's go to like 4 or 5. There we go. So now we've got tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of geometry. Look at all that geometry that we've added here. So say if we accidentally applied that, or you were working on a project and somebody, just gave you a model that looked like this, you could essentially rebuild the subdivisions with the generate tool. So let's just apply this. So I just want you to make a bunch of geometry on an object. And what's cool is you can do the multi-res, and under the generate tab, you can kind of tell Blender to generate the levels of subdivision for you. So this is 5 levels of subdividing. So if we rebuild subdivisions, it's going to take a second, and you should see some numbers appear over here once it's done. And it may take, there it goes. Okay, so something happened here, but look here, we've got 5. So now what's really cool is you can essentially crank back down to almost the original design here. So Blender's kind of reverse engineered some sculpts. So that can be really helpful if, say, if you're bringing in something from ZBrush or from another sculpting program, this generate tab, the button's gone now, but it will essentially kind of give you those levels of control back on a super detailed high poly model. So that is what the generate tab does here. And I guess you could save it. I've never done that, but you could, I guess, save your multi-res there and use it for an external program, but I'm just going to stay in Blender here. So that's what the generate drop down little tab there does. And let's just go ahead and delete that. And notice it kind of unsubdivided everything for us. So that is kind of a destructive method there. But just in case you ever need that, you have that. Let's get rid of our monkey. And now let's do a cube. So I'm going to do Shift A and bring in a cube. And now let's add a multi-res. But let's look at our advanced. So advanced drop down right here. It has the quality. So that's just going to be the quality of your subdivisions. I I never change that. It's just 4. Then we have UV smooth, and that's going to be for UV maps and stuff. We're not really doing too much of that since we're doing hard surface modeling. So we're not going to go too deep into that, but we do have boundary smooth, which is for your corners. I just keep it at the default all. But the really cool one here is creases. So say if we go into edit mode on this cube and maybe grab this, let's just do 3 and grab this whole face right here and crank up the mean crease. Make sure you have your information popped out here within and that you're on item. And under mean crease, you can crank that up to 1. And when we go into object mode and subdivide, notice the subdivision is not really applying to this corner here. Maybe let's do like 2 or 3. So notice we've kind of got this really nice, simple shape that's appeared because we've added some creases to these edges here. So we could even crank it down to maybe like 0.5. And then if we go back to object mode, it has gone crazy. So not sure. I'm in alpha mode, so maybe that's a bug there, but let's just erase that. It's non-destructive, so it's totally fine. Add the multi-res, and let's make sure we've got use creases, and let's subdivide a few times. There we go. So now we've got Blender's kind of, taking the edge crease into account. Maybe we'll crank that back up. And so that's pretty awesome. Another thing you could do is say if we did it to all of the edges. So I'm just going to hit A. So just hit A to select everything. And let's crank up the crease to like maybe 0.75. There we go. And if we go back to object mode and looky there, we've got something happening here. But Blender is taking into account the subdivision, or is taking in the crease here. So if we crank that down a little bit, I'm just going to scroll it to the left, crank back over. Notice we can kind of control how sharp our edges are with this tool. So I'm going to even subdivide even more. And we're getting a really nice shape here just by adjusting these here. So I'm going to do like 0.5, go back, and there we go. We've got a really cool kind of soft cube that you can control your edge kind of creases with the advanced tab. So that's going to be on by default. So if you wanted to play around with some of that, you can. Another thing you could do is maybe even take this one, maybe crank this one up to 100. And looky there. So we've got like nice soft edges over here. And then this one that we've cranked up to like a 100 or 1 has a very sharp edge. So that's something else that you can play with the multi-res. Like I said, most of the time you're going to be using this for sculpting. So we haven't gone over the subdivision surface modifier, but let me go ahead and maybe just delete this one here. And say we use multi-res and subdivide a few times. And I'll uncrease this. We'll just select all and drop the crease to 0. And I've messed up the math, so let's just redo that. Multi-res, subdivide 3 times. There we go. So now you got just a nice little ball there. And that is with the multi-res. But if we create another object, let's just do a cube, and do G and X, and just slide it over a little bit. And we used the subdivision surface and crank that up to 3. So now we've got 2 cubes, identical cubes. One has the multi-res at 3 and one has the subdivision at 3. But the difference is multi-res is going to be way better for sculpting. So if I take this multi-res ball or cube into sculpt mode, notice I can start sculpting on that pretty easily. But if I click on the cube here, this is our second one with the subdivision, and try to sculpt on that, it's kind of clunky. It's just not really doing anything. So most of the time you're going to be using, or if you're interested in sculpting, you're going to be doing a lot with the multi-res just because it's going to give you a lot of power and control, especially when you're doing fine details, you can kind of do them in layers or levels. So that is pretty much everything that the multi-res can do in a nutshell. We're going to go more in depth on this when we get into workflows, but hopefully that gives you just kind of a crash course on every little part of the multi-res modifier. And let's go ahead and jump into the next lesson, which is going to be the remesh, which is a new modifier. So let's go ahead and dive on in it.